Hey everyone at home, welcome back to our second installment in this series of webinars that we're doing. Zaki Property partnered with HTAG, how to identify warm hotspots, best areas to invest in, so on and so forth, right? Today, we're going to be focusing on Queensland. We discussed WA last week. Today, the focus is going to be Queensland, Brisbane. So a lot to cover here today, and we're really excited for it. So before we get in, Matt, for anybody new here, do you want to just do a quick intro? I know most of the people are people who've already been to the first webinar, but do you want to do a quick intro here?
Yeah, so thanks, Arshad, and thanks again for organising this. Really love the WA event. It was great. It was fun. A bit about me, co-founder of HTAG, and essentially have been in the data crunching and data analytics space for a while. Before that, I was working for large construction development organizations as an estimator. So data and numbers are my sort of forte and have been for a while. And that's pretty much it essentially. HTAG is my life at the moment. And yeah, that's that. I love looking at data and trying to find many different angles of, making the right decision.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I love that. And it's like, I think like one of the things we talked about last week is not just your, like obviously looking at the data, but your quality of service to the people that use HTAG. I mean, obviously there's a strong interlap because everyone you're talking with, it's about data, but it's like, it's phenomenal, amazing.
No.
Quick intro to myself for those who don't know me already. Arshad Zaki. I know there's some people, decent amount of the attendees here today are buyers agents. We have some sophisticated investors here, mortgage brokers as well. Arshad Zaki, director of Zaki Property, we're buyers advocacy. I'm the head of sourcing at Zaki Property. We're off-market acquisition specialists, investor. We primarily focus on residential investment clients working across Australia. So quick intro. Cool. So purpose of today's event, so the main feedback we got from last week was everyone really enjoyed the event. They just wanted maybe a bit more time focusing on the area, analyzing the areas themselves. So last week we spent a decent amount of time talking about strategy, fundamentals, so on and so forth. So this week we'll probably keep that particular portion a bit shorter, considering that you can just watch the WA recording. That stuff is not going to change drastically state by state. It's not going to be like the framework you use to
Mhm.
think your strategy is going to change based on state. Matt, if you want to interject and correct me, like the broader investment framework you have will stay roughly the same. So we'll quickly summarize that area at the beginning. But if that's something that you're interested in, I'd highly recommend watching the WA recording. I'll share the link in the chat shortly. It's on my YouTube page. And we spend like almost an hour on these first couple of questions on strategy and fundamentals. Today, we'll just spend probably 2 minutes on each, and then we'll jump into the core focus, which is because there's quite a few more suburbs that we're going to be talking about this week compared to last week, where WA is, a little bit later in the growth cycle. And then we have a few questions that I've written down from people about one about HTAG, but two about like strategy and I like taking not just the process of analyzing data, but like how to connect that to strategy. So we'll probably use a few of the examples for that. Matt, anything you wanted to add over here? Any questions?
No,
Any requests from the audience of additional content that you want covered? Feel free to drop that in the chat as well. Beautiful. All right. Let's go. One thing to remind everyone is, I think, Matt, when do prices for HTAG go up?
tomorrow, I think on the 12th. I think Alex has scheduled them. Yeah, tomorrow, 12th.
Prices for HTAG go up tomorrow. It highly recommend signing up. I think you can see from these webinars, HTAG, amazing software. I'll drop the discount code in the chat. So there's the discount code, 35% off, access to the mastermind community, so on and so forth, right? Definitely recommend signing up. And if you do sign up, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, if you do sign up now, the price increases don't affect you, you're locked in at.
No. We're all about your loyalty. So, I mean, we still have subscribers that have subscribed 4 years ago under, $80 per month, essentially, or less. So, yeah, I mean, when you subscribe, you stay locked in with that price for long periods of time, unless there's like quantum leaps in the service that we provide. Then we increase it. But our main strategy is, rewarding the loyal customers, which means that you don't get any price increases subsequently after that. Shouldn't affect you.
Beautiful. Okay, sweet. I'll do a reminder of that at the end, but did an early stage reminder just to knock it out of the way in case anyone drops off. Beautiful. So we did this activity last time. We'll skip it. Matt, do you want to maybe give like a 2 to 3 minute summary of the strategy,
Yeah.
this slide? Again, for those who want to go in depth on this, I think we spent 15 minutes discussing it last time. Maybe just a quick summary of your insights here.
Yeah, quickly, strategy can be many multiple things, but essentially what do you want and why? You need to understand your goals, which involves your borrowing capacity and everything else, and understand, under which intention you're making that initial purchase. But predominantly the strategy gets reduced to these 4 points. What is your budget? What is your investment time horizon? Whether you want a hotspot or a warm spot, and risk profile. Now, I'll just quickly talk about hotspot, warm spot, because it particularly relates to Queensland. Essentially, hotspot, warm spot is just the terminology that we leverage because hotspotting has been known as a term out there for sense making, as in, it's an area that's returning above average return. So warm spot will be something before that, which allows it to enter the markets and leverage the full momentum of a hotspot as opposed to sort of diving in halfway. So, and that number 3 relates to specifically, it speaks to directly, although it's on face value, you can't recognize it. Essentially, when do I want to leverage into additional purchases? When do I want to generate that equity so I can leverage into additional purchases and build my portfolio, and then the risk profile, obviously, it talks about, what your risk profile is essentially, and, whether you want to be exposed to certain factors or elements that could impact on the overall growth of your portfolio long term. It's an insurance policy more so than a predictor of growth. And there are, certain things you must consider before you provide an answer to number 4.
Beautiful. All right, that's nice and clean, nice and quick. Let's talk about some of the fundamentals of data analysis. Again, maybe just a quick summary. I think this is something you discussed in depth last time. A quick summary over here would be great as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the first adage that I usually use when it comes to data, however you want to say it, is every point of data is a reflection of behavior. So that's something that it needs to be really internalized. As I said before, if I go to McDonald's and buy coffee 3 times in a row at 8 a.m., that becomes a data point that can be used as a prediction methodology. And this is what Google does when you look at the phone and it tells you, there's 7 minutes to your, mum's house because you go there every Tuesday. So every data point is a reflection of behavior. And then because we want to interpret human behavior in order to understand, which investment location is a good location for us and under our brief, we need to understand which metrics to look at, what they represent, and how they actually work together in constructing that behavioral narrative, if you will, so that we know whether it's a yay or nay investment location for our brief. So I guess the crux of it, data is a representation of behavior, and you have many different, you can have 20, 30, or 50 metrics, and each of those has a particular meaning in relation to what you're trying to achieve, and you need to piecemeal and connect that into a story.
Beautiful, beautiful. So there actually were a couple of interesting questions that people asked me, and I was like, look, I think this might be a good platform to discuss those questions on data analysis. But before I jump to those questions, I think to me, one of the most important points that we discussed last week, and something that I've kind of learned from yourself as well, is it's a game of probability, right? It's like you want to pick the areas where the probability of the investment being good investment is as high as possible, right? So because there's a lot of like investors who they have a really specific hypothesis about a particular area that's not represented in the data, right? And that hypothesis might be correct, might be incorrect, right? But when it's not represented in the data, the probability that you are correct is much harder to prove, right? And then it's like, then it becomes a question of, do you want to take on that risk of going off some sort of hypothetical or qualitative analysis that is so much more harder to prove. Whereas when the point that you're making is coded into the data, you can see the data representation of it. You know that there's a really high probability of this happening. So it kind of becomes like an opportunity costing. Yes, area A that you've identified, and you have this hypothetical thesis about it, that hypothesis might be correct, right? Maybe you're like, oh, I've spoken to some people over there. It seems like gentrification's happening. The gentrification's not showing in the data, but I'm confident it's happening. You could be right, and it could be a great area to invest. But you might as well invest in an area just similar that it's coded into the data and the data shows it, because this you can be far more certain. If there are no areas that fit the data is good at that budget, then maybe you can look at option A. But there's always going to be an area where you can be a lot more confident. That was one of the most important points that I've taken from using HTAG, the community mastermind, so on and so forth. It gives you that extra layer of confidence in the area that you're going to invest in or the area that you're suggesting to your client. You're not just like, oh, I have this qualitative hypothesis about gentrification or about demographics or, about this new hospital that they're building, but there's no data to show about it. You can actually point to the specific data points and be like, this is why I'm 100% confident in this area. So a bit of a ramble over there. What are your thoughts on that?
I didn't want to interrupt you because what you said is spot on. And I think, I just like to say something. So there's a tendency in the industry and any other industry for that matter for the arguments to be reduced to who is right and who is wrong. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think what people need to understand is that, there's no certainty in life, and it's not, and research process is a process of triangulation, trying to look at a particular problem and trying to solve it and look from as many different angles as you can in order to be able to make a decision. And usually the arguments about data and property investing come down to, well, as you said, what if this area gentrifies? And then we're speaking about abstract terms that might or might not happen. Now, it's an argument that nobody can win. It's the first thing. And it's an argument that doesn't go anywhere. What I try to do and what I try to say is, how about we make a decision on the basis of what's in front of us? How about we use as many data points as we can? And a data point can be, as I said, I think I said before somewhere else, the behavior of let's say traffic light data. UK banks use traffic light data in their big data models to predict and to actually make a decision on who to lend to within a particular suburb. Also, which suburbs are more sort of conducive to lending and which are not. What I'm trying to say is that I guess what we need to develop a mindset to force ourselves to look at a problem from many different angles and to see what's in front of us. Now, we can have hunches, we can have intuition, absolutely, and I agree with that, and you can have that. However, if I had to layer that, I would first want to look at what's in front of me and try to understand what is in front of me, what each data point means, and educate myself in that respect. And then at the top of that, I could actually, because at the end of the day, each decision that you're going to make, whether it's data analysis, picking a location, picking an asset, or choosing an ice cream flavor, comes down to discretion. So there's going to be an element at the end of discretion that you apply, which is subjective in nature. There's always going to be that element. However, what you're trying to do is you're trying to eliminate the emotion from the process, trying to look at what's in front of you from multiple angles, as many as you can, to arrive at a particular decision. And this in academic circles is called triangulation. Okay. Now, I always, people debate, oh yeah, what about gentrification? What about this? Again, if something is happening, if something is moving, as I said to you, me going to McDonald's and buying coffee 3 times in a row, there's already a couple of data points there. There's already a sample size. So if something is happening If something is happening in a suburb, there should be a sample size somewhere represented in the data. Now, there is an argument that we might not be recording a particular data sample that reflects a particular transition. Noted. And I'm always open to, and I'm not saying we as HTAG, we as individuals, and I'm always open to additional ideas and arguments to see that. But why leap up above into abstraction when before we actually develop an understanding that's fundamental about what's actually in front of us to read that? And then you're exactly right. It is a game of probability. Regretfully, we are constrained by the boundaries of Australia. And we are constrained by potentially having 1,000 or 500 great suburbs to invest in right now, And you know what I always say. You've been part of the community for a while. I always say, I never talk about an individual suburb. I always try to avoid it when people tell me, what do you think about this suburb? I always say, what is this suburb in relation to other suburbs that you're comparing it to on the basis of your brief? So it is increasing the probability of an outcome, but also doing a comparison, going through a comparative process where you find out the best one for you. It's never just a single suburb, which means that what we are inadvertently doing if we are just talking about a single suburb, we are saying that the metrics that represent that suburb are inherently good and bad in every single occasion. And that is incorrect reasoning. They are good and bad in comparison to others that fit the same brief within the same price range. So the comparison always needs to be there. And I always encourage the comparison. It forces you to think. It forces you to generate ideas in your mind that you can actually pass on and explain to your clients as a buyer's agent. And then that reflects competence and also security and ethics. I mean, if I have an argument, Arshad, with you and I say, listen, I believe that this suburb is a good investment location, and I tell you why, and I tell you openly and objectively with that argument, first thing, I'm exposing myself there. But that I'm not going to look at it in those terms. I'm not going to look at it in terms of exposure. I'm telling you how I arrived at a particular conclusion on the basis of some points. Now, you can argue those points and you can say, Matt, however, I believe that point B that you're talking about is not what it represents. Okay, let's talk. Let's see why. Let's crunch it. Let's improve this reasoning. So it is all about that. And last thing and most important thing is increasing the probability. You will never be certain about a decision, but you can make, this is why the saying exists, cross the T's and dot the I's. You need to go through that process. And the preference is to look at as many data points as you can.
Beautiful, beautiful. So couple of more follow-up questions off of that again were asked by people to me. So one is, so I think like one of the things that some people fear with, just using data to inform their decision is that the data is behind, right? It's like, oh, the data says this, but that feels so old because of what I'm seeing on the ground is different. How often and how up to date are HTAG's data, and what does that process look like for you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. So now we updated data on a monthly basis, which in property terms is light speed. And why do I say that? Because property is an illiquid asset. So we're not talking about shares or crypto where the trading happens on intraday levels where there's high volatilities and volumes.
Yeah.
Property is an liquid asset, meaning that, I can't buy and sell it in a day. You know what I mean? My home. Imagine a situation where you're buying and selling within a day and moving and all of that. Imagine a social construct within which you buy and sell houses on such a high volume, which means that you need an updated data every second, like they do in shares, or like they do in crypto. You need a data updated every second because there are transactions happening every second. Property, it doesn't happen with property that way. And with property is much more stable and monolith if I had to compare it to other asset types, which is why a time frame of 1 month is actually light speed compared to, it's actually equivalent to the reporting that you have for shares in crypto on intraday level. Now, why do I say that? Well, property and movements on property and behavior of individuals. Now, movements of property prices is founded or it's underpinned by the behavior of individuals, their purchasing patterns and preferences, and when you establish purchasing patterns and preferences on a group level, on a society level, or on a state level, you generate trends and patterns that do not shift and change from month to month. So you do not see a shift in a trend in a days on market that's taking a nosedive simply because the subsequent month release is 120 days. The trend doesn't change. And there are many examples of great investment locations that in their whole journey had, for example, 2 years ago, a days on market on 125 days. And then the second month came out with 25, you know? So some things could happen, but the trend doesn't alter, which inadvertently relates back to the question, or the answer is that having an update of 1 month is not a daily update, absolutely, but it's not required in the property sense.
No, I agree. And honestly, 1 month is better than most softwares. I think like some of the older legacy softwares, it's 3 months. Some of them, it's even like 6 months. So
that's too long. That would be too long. But 1 month is decent enough. Now, guys, and Arshad as well, when we figure out a way, you know, to have real-time data, because you have to think about it in these terms as well. You know, there are lags between recordings of data. Now, the lags can be a day. You know, think about the whole process of listing, purchasing, recording, and all of that stuff. Again, human behavior. It's not a machine. It's not perfect. So there are lags in everything we do. If we figure out a way, I mean, to have something distributed like a blockchain model where, you know, you record everything in every instance and you connect pieces of information, which where the industry is going, and we are entertaining that idea.
yeah.
You know, you're going to improve this delivery method, absolutely. But considering from a macroeconomic perspective, the fact that property is an illiquid asset, by liquid, I mean, it doesn't change hands. Liquidity, what does liquidity mean? Some people invest in shares because they can buy and sell shares in a day when they need to access their money. With property, it doesn't really work that way. It's not as fast as that, you know what I mean? So having a month lag, if you will, if you want to call it a lag, does not impact your decision-making.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, one final question before we discuss areas, and this might be actually a question to look at while we're discussing areas, is how to interpret, like on every graph that there's the actual, like, you know, data points for each month, and then there's the trend line, right? And sometimes, let's just take hold period as an example. The trend line might be going up, but the hold period has taken a recent dip, right? How do people make sense of the trend line and yeah, just that?
Yeah, so remember when it's a good question as well, and I just don't say you're asking good questions for the sake of it. It is a good question because it refers back to that notion that I said that every data point is a representation of behavior.
Yeah.
So everything that you see on a page, try to think about why is this happening. So when it comes to hold periods, trend can be increasing, but the sentiment about the area changes. You know, I prefer a Big Mac today, but probably I'll go for a cheeseburger tomorrow. Now, I don't eat Maccas, but I'm just giving you an example. So, you know, the preference about something does change and it goes through cycles. Now, you can analyze hold periods in many different ways. First, you can analyze its trend and how severe the slope is going up, which means the deliverability factor is increasing and therefore the future influx of supply is reducing. You can then analyze also the changes in the sentiment. So sometimes you'll see the trend is increasing, but it went up and then it went down and then it went up and then it went down and then it went up and then it went down. Now, the sense making about that trend becomes more meaningful. Again, coming back to my previous elaboration, is when you have two areas superimposed one against the other. When you look at a Taylor Hills, for example, hold periods, which is a very firm straight line like that, no sentiment change whatsoever about the area. And when you look at some other area where they sell off and buy, again, nothing is inherently meaningful without comparison. Nothing is inherently meaningful. So when you look at a graph that changes in a particular way and has a particular values or trends, that doesn't mean shit. Sorry to use that term. It doesn't mean anything. It means only when you superimpose it against another graph and you say, okay, now I understand. And by the way, that is how knowledge is generated. I mean, we connect words into a sentence. One word has a meaning because of the word that comes before it. I mean, everything that we see in the world is relational. It's not like nothing in itself is worth its worth. It's worth because of the connection. I'm getting philosophical now, but it comes back to the graph as well. You know, like it's you know, And again, not only to the graph itself, but to the price point that you're analyzing at, because you might find you'll see patterns everywhere. You'll see patterns that graphs are below 500K range behave in a similar pattern, especially if they're in the same LGA, than graphs that are 850K. Taylor Hills is 850. And how did he get there? He got there because, you know, he got there somehow. One of the reasons is because people don't want to sell property in Taylor Hills. You know what I mean? So the scarcity element increases.
Exactly, yeah. And by the way, for those people who like Matt's philosophical insights, just a completely separate point. He has a book coming out. Is it out or is it coming out?
It's coming out in November.
Coming out in November. It is like there's nothing property related in that book, right?
No. It's my PhD. I got a PhD in organizational psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing qualitative and quantitative data analysis, which sort of transfers onto HTAG.
Yeah.
So I was looking for patterns there in words and data. I was researching relationship between identity and anxiety.
Beautiful. There you go. So if you want some deep philosophical thoughts outside of property.
What a plug. What a plug. I like this.
I'm all about the plug, bro. I plug everyone everywhere. Sometimes people are like, oh, bro, why are you always hyping everyone up? I'm like, you just got to spread the good energy, you know what I mean?
I was talking about it in Mastermind the other day. I'll be short. You know, have you heard of John Nash?
Yeah, the game theory guy, right?
Correct. So he revised the game theory, and he said, and you know the movie, The Beautiful Mind.
Beautiful.
You know, if we all go for the same girl, we're all going to lose. Yeah. So he revised the game theory, and he said that you win in a game if every single actor considers the action of another actor, i.e., help another actor.
Yeah.
And that's why in the movie, when you saw the 4 girls, and if they all go for the beautiful girl, they'll all lose and the other girls are going to block them out. But essentially what I'm saying is, and what you're doing, it's an ecosystem. People should help each other. It's not like a zero-sum game as it is in shares. If you win, I lose. And that's how we work with HTAG as well. We promote all of the buyers agents that we can on our pages that have been our subscribers for a long time. And what you're doing is great. I mean, it's not only clickbait, it's not only, but believe me, sets into motion something that really should happen in the industry all the time. There's enough out there of pies and money for everyone. You know what I mean? And I think you're great at doing that.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. All right, let's jump into the areas. So we'll start off with just discussion of Queensland as a whole. And I know like it's a bit of a difficult one because Queensland is a massive market. Like WA, it's like pretty much Perth, Bunbury, Mandurah, and maybe Geraldton for some people. Other than that, most of it is like very rural, whereas Queensland, it's Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Toowoomba. Then you go like up there, Hervey Bay, Townsville, Mackay, like the list just goes on, right? But yeah, you guys have a page. If you want to screen share at this point, Matt, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, I'll start doing it. I'm just trying to locate everything. Essentially, Queensland overall, let me just start sharing. I'll just go through a quick page, which sort of aggregates the data at the, you know, as you said, where is my, it's here.
Personally, like, I'm not even a fan of state level data because like, it's like.
Yeah, can you see my page?
Yes, I can.
It says Queensland real estate, yeah?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So Queensland, yeah, go. Sorry, Arshad, did you want to say something?
No, I was saying go for it.
Yeah, so Queensland overall, I mean, it is one of these things. Why do I like the area itself? Let's overlay it with the RCS overall. This is the LGA level. Why do I like the area itself is, and why I said Queensland is my favorite state. I mean, not because I guess I live in New South Wales, but because it's at that peculiar point where we saw a transition from WA to Queensland, and we are having some rampant hotspots in Queensland now. But it's a mixed bag. When I say a mixed bag, I mean, you know, in Queensland, you either have warm spots or hot spots. You either have areas that will sort of boom or are already like right on the way to getting there to those, you know, plus 10% growth annual. And you have the Curvens of the world that are pumping and generating 25% more than WA. I mean, who would have thought? The reason why I like Queensland is my I told you so factor. I remember when everyone was investing in WA, and this was 2 years ago, I was pretty vocal, not about the negatives about WA, but I was always vocal about when you speak about an area, try to compare it to others, as I said, and also talk about timeframes. Tell me, how much steam it has, what do you think about its long-term potential? Give me some context around it. Don't just pump the areas like, because that's dangerous for investors, because investors can see influencers online promoting certain areas and they dive into it and it doesn't actually suit their brief or their strategy. So I was always vocal about WA, trying to change the narrative and push, not because I didn't like its growth prospects, but I wanted people to actually stand and consider some other aspects such as timeframes. And at that time, when I was doing it, nobody thought that, you know, the WAs of the world would ever exist, you know. And obviously, I had a few battles online, as you do these days. But yeah, here we are, and seeing curve and pumping, 25% in the last year or a bit more, which is essentially more than most of the areas in WA, or that were the headline for at that time, you know. So as I guess the takeaway from, I'm digressing a little, but the takeaway is this: everything moves in cycles. There is no permanent hotspot, and don't worry, you're not going to miss out on any opportunities. If you structure and lay the data right and you understand your brief, there's always a place under the sun for you. As I always say, a hotspot for you is not a hotspot for me. But anyway, what do we see? Typical price is 687K. Rents are higher because they've been increasing more. Yields is 7.44. Now, this is aggregated at the state level. I can probably hear some people screaming in the background, no, there are areas at 750. No, this is just aggregated at the state level. I'm not going to go into the suburb data. I just want to look at the curve. We can see that it's a much more healthier curve than the WA curve, in a sense that it's been predominantly growing most of the time, but we see a huge pump after 2021. Now, you know, this is momentum of COVID. It's also momentum of movement of demand. And it's also momentum of, you know, people running away from WA and actually investing in other areas, trying to look for other opportunities. But we can see that there's a solid histogram at the back when it comes to the volume of sales. So in my view, what I see, the movements of the curve are also supported by the volume of sales, which is what I prefer to see. Medium rents have been increasing. The curve is not as forceful, I guess, as the price. I mean, there's always a trade-off between rents, between yields and price growth, as we all know, which is why Queensland now is also gaining appeal when you compare it to Melbourne areas, because you still have the capacity to enter Queensland at 4.5 or 5 or between 4.5 and 5.5 gross yield, which will, I guess, less of that, baseball bat hit in the head from negative gearing, and potentially allow you to leverage into additional purchases sooner. The yield has been dropping, as we've seen, which is inverse, as I said, to the rise in rents because of this pump here. It's normal. Now, the question is, it's been steadily increasing. How much room does it have to go, Queensland as a state? We see a forceful increase here. Again, generalizing, I don't like to generalize. It potentially does have another 2 or 3 years to go. In some areas, especially generating plus 10% growth. Some areas are delayed. Cairns is delayed after Townsville when it comes to growth. So you'll see a staggered approach there. I think Rockhampton, and now I have to put a caveat here. I haven't had a look at the data for Rockhampton in a while, but I think people have moved from Rockhampton or still investing in bits and pieces there. But Townsville is pumping, and we see a lot of movement to Cairns. And I think those 3 towns, because they're affordable, they allow for both internal and external demand, i.e. for properties affordable for residents, and they also invite investors because of the price point. I think those.
Could I interrupt over here? So one question I actually had, another one I meant to ask this earlier. Where in the data is external migration represented? Because obviously external migration is whether it's from other suburbs into that particular suburb, whether it's from state to state. Like, I think that's like a major point that people are talking about, or even from overseas migrants coming and moving to an area. It's a point that's talked about quite a lot. And a few people have asked, like, where is that represented outside of just like, here's the migration data. Which data points do we see that represented in, and how can we make sense of it when we're looking at it?
Are you talking about migration or external demand?
Migration, like migration from like non-local places. So like Yeah, external demand from like through migration.
So there are two things here. You're either talking about migration, i.e., I move from Sydney to Townsville,
Yeah.
or are you talking about external demand, i.e., I live in Sydney, but I buy a place in Townsville?
I'm more referring to the initial one, but let's maybe tackle both if that's all right.
Yeah. So migration now, my reduce it down to simplified. Scaffold your explanations and understanding. Now, first, we have to start with an understanding of what produces price growth. And we know that a reducing supply and an increasing demand produces price growth. So if there's an increasing level of demand in an area, you'll see, a reduction in days on market, a reduction in vacancy rates, clearance rates, more auctions and higher levels of clearance rates and buyer search indexes increasing. So that is actually a representation of purchasing behavior on the ground. Now, I don't care where it comes from. Personally, I just want to know what is happening on the ground reflected in the data, whether property in that area is more demanded for by purchasers. Now, the argument about external internal demand is simple, and this is a feedback from people such as yourself. So when you go to Townsville now and when you go to buy a house, what you will see is potentially more investors, or even 50-50, but I would say more investors bidding for the same house. And that's reflected in the plus 15 or 10% growth. What you see in areas on the ground that are below 10%, you usually see owner-occupiers first starting to bid for the homes. Now, are these owner-occupiers from within the suburb or from the suburb next door in the LGA? Well, that's hard to track. But I always revert it back to growth, demand, and outcome. So when I say a hotspot a hotspot is usually an area that has a compounding of both internal and external demand. What I mean is that owner-occupiers are purchasing property within that area and increasing the demand for the property. And that starts a positive feedback loop. And if the area remains affordable and then has all the other metrics correct, you'll see investors migrating. You will never see plus 25% growth in Townsville because of owner-occupiers only. There is a threshold there, and that threshold is usually 10%. However, if you wanna bring it down back to proof, look at open homes. When you actually go, when you try to purchase a property and ask around how many investors are buying or how many owner occupiers, and you'll see. Essentially, the rule of thumb is anything above 10%, rampant growth, 10, 15, 20, there is a compounding effect between owner occupiers and investors in curve, and that is what is happening. When you see between 0 to 5% growth, most of that growth is coming from owner occupiers. Now, I'm trying to improve sense making, so I have to reduce it to terms internal, external. Now, I don't have proof whether the internal demand, the owner occupied demand, might have migrated for the suburb next door, but essentially, usually people buy houses within the places where they already live. Unless in some instances, obviously, they're moving from Melbourne to Queensland. But then the next question is that I will ask people who are thinking about those cohort is how significant or big that cohort is as a whole data set. Yeah. So essentially, I talk about internal, external demand, but what I'm essentially talking about is an onset of owner-occupied demand from property within a suburb because of certain aptitudes of that suburb, and then a compounding effect of external demand, i.e. everyone buying in Perth while living in Queensland and New South Wales. And in order to see above average growth and way above average growth, I'm not talking average growth is 5%, way above average, the 10, the 15s, the 20s, you need to have both cohorts present. And what usually happens in that instance is that you see it becomes very hard to source real estate. It becomes very hard to source real estate because people are competing for it. How do I have this information? I have this information from calling, real estate agents. I have this information from 6 years of experience of running HTAG and people using the data. And in our mastermind, for example, people go to open houses in Taylor Hills, and I'm always mentioning Taylor Hills because I like it as an area. And they say, I've just been in Taylor Hills. There's 10 owner occupiers here now investing. They're mentioning Milton West. For example, it was 10 owner occupiers buying. Now it's 7 owner occupiers and 3 investors, or 10 owner occupiers and 3 investors. So you see the increase in demand sort of increasing, and you see the mix starting to sort of merge more as the positive feedback loop kicks in and you just start seeing more growth. So answering your question in a roundabout way, it's not, I don't think in terms of demographics. I think in terms of preference for purchasing behavior and how that reflects in price growth. And I see preference in increasing demand and reducing supply. So essentially essentially and preference combined produces enormous price growth. But for that to happen, you need essentially both cohorts, both owner occupiers as well as investors merging to the market.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, cool. Let's carry on with Queensland, and then we'll jump into the budget picks. I think that answers the questions pretty perfectly. One other thing that I just wanted to flag is one of the questions that was asked was, so last week, the analysis of all the areas we did was on the HTAG platform, whereas you kind of mentioned analyzing through like spreadsheets and comparing that as well. So I think what would be good to do today is, if it's possible, if we have the time for it, maybe because we're going to do budget, mid, and high market picks. Maybe for the mid market picks, we'll analyze and compare using a spreadsheet, if that works.
No, it doesn't. I'll tell you why. It takes hours.
Okay, then
it takes hours to come to a perfect decision. And now I'm contradicting myself. There's no perfection and certainty. But this is the thing. This is what I'm saying. It takes a long time to actually assess the suburbs. What I can do is I can show you how I've done one this morning for a client.
Beautiful.
And what I've actually done. I can tell you that. But to do it on the fly and to actually compare them, there is a lot to consider. But I'll show you when you understand when I show you the spreadsheet.
Beautiful. Okay, that's perfect. I think then maybe the best place for everyone to see that is in the community mastermind.
Absolutely. And just to say to people, now I'll show them and they can reach the conclusion to themselves that it's going to take us about, I took 10 hours to finish that spreadsheet for a client, just so you know. So I took 10 hours in 2 days, 2 sittings, 5 hours each. What was I about to say? The process is you need to understand the brief. You need to orchestrate some kind of filtering to develop a shortlist, but then that shortlist needs to be ranked, and you need to assign weightings to metrics. And what weightings means is which metric is more important than the other in order for you to realize your brief. So what that means is that you need to go through the whole set of metrics on the platform and pick and choose which one is more important and assign weighting and rank in order to produce a particular score. And that's what's called a detailed comparison. As you know, we take all of our customers through that journey so they actually know how to do that. To do it online will be a long process, but I can definitely show one that's a fairly detailed one to see what the expectations are.
Beautiful. That would be perfect. We have a quick question here from Ram. So he says, so if there is more than 10% growth, then it means there's a lot of investor activity more than owner occ. And if it is 0 to 5% growth, then it means the market is mostly owner occ. I think the way that I understood the point you're making is this is suburb dependent, right? In areas like Townsville, for example, because the owner occ demand is not that high, it probably can't drive more than 10% growth. So the rest of the growth is usually from investors. But if you come to certain suburbs in Melbourne, you can have like Melbourne, Sydney, you can have 30% growth driven purely by owner occ. That's the way that I understood. Do you want to answer that question as well?
Yeah, so first, I didn't say when it's above 10% that it's mainly investors. I said it's both compounding cohorts. If the gentleman is looking for a split, that's impossible to determine. But the methodology behind it is what matters. So you might think about it this way. In order for something, a property grows because of scarcity. Everyone fighting for the same piece of the pie or for the same cupcake, as I say. So the more people you have fighting for the house, the more the seller has the opportunity to increase pricing. Now, in Townsville, you'll see that on the ground, but I'm telling you I'm giving you a theory that it's reflected on the ground. For something to grow above 10%, 15, 20, or 25, you need both cohorts fighting for the property. You need both of them to compound that demand and increase the scarcity of the asset. Now, what you usually, and I'm linking it to growth as a reference point for people when they're researching, so it allows them to make sense where certain properties are at a particular life cycle. Now, you just don't look at the past growth to understand whether it's a hotspot or a warm spot. You have to look at other metrics as well. But you can use the past growth. Put it this way. I look at Townsville and it's growing 25% in the last year. I don't need to look at anything else. I know it's a hotspot. And a hotspot is both demand from internal and external residents. What is the split? I don't know. Whether it's 50-50, whether it's 70-30, but they both need to be present there. Okay. Usually, if one cohort is not present, it means it's unaffordable. So usually when owner-occupiers are not present in a suburb, it means that the property is not affordable for owner-occupiers. And then my next question to that would be, I'm asking myself a question now, is if owner-occupiers can't afford it, why can investors? Usually the investor demand wouldn't be there, which is why this is exactly why the owner-occupier demand is the one that kicks off the growth cycle, which is why the affordability index or affordability of property is essential for that growth to occur and for the compounding to happen. I use growth ranges as a proxy that are reflected in the feedback from the market, and then you'll see and understand. Between 0 to 5, it's usually owner-occupier demand driving that growth. Now, are there any investors? Sure. But in percentage terms, the significance becomes meaningless. That's why I'm saying it's usually a predominantly owner-occupier demand that gets it to that 5%.
Beautiful. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to cover on this page, or shall we jump into?
No, let's jump into the areas. So I think this is the first. I think this is a document. I don't want to go through the filter. I mean, not that I don't want to. Conscious of time and what you said, I don't want to structure that algorithm to come to a particular area, and explain all of that. I'll show the platform anyway, but I think this is the shortlist that I emailed to you about the price range, which is sub 500. And these are some of the areas that are good. Now, I analyze data on a regular basis for our clients, both as an additional service and both just to track and keep, my finger on the pulse of the market. So I can know, just looking at these areas, I know which ones are good, which ones are not that good. Although they all fall part of the shortlist. Again, one is better than the other. Again, consideration must be given whether we want to enter a hotspot or a warm spot. As we see, Mount Louisa has been pumping 18%, Curvin 27%. I can't pronounce this one, 21. But we have some that have been pumping less. But predominantly what we see in this list is all of the areas have had above 10% growth in the last year. Which means it's going to be harder for you to find the real estate, but you still might enter, and you probably have, a couple of years left to actually leverage that momentum. Now, and I think the purpose of this live session is let's determine why these areas actually got there. Is that it, Arshad? Would you say that? How did these areas actually get to this 18% growth, 27% growth, 21? You want to analyze the suburb pages and explain how they actually got there?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's maybe I'll actually pick a couple.
Let me see which ones you think are good from this list.
Good. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to pick the ones that are just good. I'm going to pick the ones that I'm really interested in. So one is Kirwan. I really want to look at Kirwan. I definitely want to look at Kingaroy and Emerald as well, because those ones are like smaller towns that I haven't been looking at. So it's just like these others I've all looked at. I'm pretty sure I've purchased at least one property in all of these suburbs except Kingaroy and Emerald. So I'd be very keen to look at those as possible options. And then are there any other in the group, like in the chat? Are there any specific?
The more you introduce, let's start with those three.
Yes,
simply because it takes a while to address everything. Yeah. But let's start with these three and how they got there. So what are we doing? We're talking about Kingaroy.
Yeah.
Curvin.
Curvin and
which one is the other one? Emerald, yeah?
Emerald, yes.
Yeah, okay. So So every bit of information on the page is something that you should analyze. The first thing that I always do and how I start is I start with the 1 to 4 years metrics, and then I look at the metrics that are 4 to 10 years. Okay. But then I convert all of this into a spreadsheet and actually do an analysis and a comparison. I address it, but we'll do it on the suburb page now. The 1 to 4 year metrics are the supply and demand metrics that we have on the page. Now, what are we looking at? We're looking at Kingaroy. I can't pronounce that. I'm very bad with pronouncing names of suburbs, so apologies. So now, what do we have up here? Here we have the current values for the current month. By the way, sorry, these are rolling averages for the last 3 months, but, you know, trying to make it more contextual. We have, you know, stock on market. It's all color-coded as, you know, I guess, opportunistic, neutral, or disadvantageous. And opportunistic, the green coloring. Neutral would be, you know, the yellows, and we don't have any reds here. So the way you analyze the areas of appeal from 1 to 4 years is you need to analyze the current values, but you also need to pay very close attention to trends. And this area is an interesting one. And I'm glad that you picked it because of one particular reason that I've just realized now. So you need to establish trends for every metric. And that's a long-term trend for stock on market percentage, but as well as a short-term one. So remember how I said the property is in a liquid asset, and because it's a liquid, it's very hard to change the trend. So when you already have established trend for the last 4 years, you know that inadvertently that would be nosediving into the future as well, because for this trend to actually change or revert, and by the way, look at this slope, it's very steep. Yeah, for this trend slope to start trending back upwards, and I didn't use that software now. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So for this trend to be actually increasing, and by the way, before I go there, let me just say, and I guess everyone is a buyer's agent in the group, so they will know, a trending down stock on market means that there's less and less stock on market for sale. So it's a supply metric, and this indicates a reduction in supply. But I will not just look at the current.
We're making some assumptions about base level knowledge. If you're someone listening in that has like, you don't even know what these terms stock and market, inventory, days on market mean, we'd highly recommend going to HTAG has like a dictionary type page where they explain what each of these mean.
You can hover over the metrics as well.
Oh,
So stock on market is the total number of active for sale listings on market, unsold as the cutoff date for the month.
yeah.
But now, of course, there's a dictionary with a more elaborate explanation.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you hover over everything, it really gives you a definition. We try to make it as easy as possible for understanding.
Now, I would highly recommend if anyone's unsure of what any of these mean or what the implications are, going to the dictionary page. I remember when I first became a BA, one of the first things I did was just go over that dictionary page, HTAG's version of it. I think like other softwares, their version of it as well. And I think now there's the AI as well. You can just ask the AI questions.
Yeah. So there's
we're making assumptions that everyone has an idea.
This is the dictionary, guys, and you get the ranges as well that are favorable, not favorable, etc. Most of the metrics are hyperlinked, so you can actually expand and look at an article that we've written about it, of how we derive it, how we come about it, what its significance is. It's very educational heavy, so that's our intent. Our intent is not only to give you the data, but also to educate anyone who's using it on how to actually employ it appropriately and actually make good decisions.
Beautiful. So let's get back to it.
Going back to this trend. So you don't only look, so stock on market currently is favorable, but sitting at 0.27%. But personally, and this is when it comes down to significance and associating assigning weighting, I don't care about the current stock on market. Personally, when I analyze, and I'll show you, I care, but the significance is lesser than the long-term trend and the short-term trend in the stock on market metric. So I analyze both. In this instance, I see a substantial nosedive, which I know will continue in the future because property is a liquid asset. It will take a year of stock on market to sit about here above for this whole trend to shift to neutral and maybe start increasing. Okay, I'll give you an example. See this little spike here? It went to 0.71. Now that's still low, but that little spike didn't actually change the trend. If this spike was continuing or even growing for another year, then maybe you'll start seeing a shift in the overall trend. But when you establish a trend for a particular metric, trend equals direction. Trend is your friend. Now, the next question that you might have in your mind is, okay, if I establish a trend for 4 years, how much can I assume that it will go into the future? Now, you can do a mirror effect and say 4 and 4, plus around for, you know, math stupidity factor, and say you're certain that it will go 2 years into the future. And that's a guarantee that it will, because it will not change in the next 2 years this sharp of a trend. So you already know where the stock market is heading. Not only that, the recent supply has also been hitting the trend, which means that it's been reducing. Phenomenal. Tick. I tick this metric. I go down. I look at inventory. Inventory is also reducing. Now, the difference between inventory and stock or market is that the overall trend is reducing, but we see a bit of an increase in recently. However, it's sporadic and it's dropping. How meaningful is this? Not really. But pay attention. Look at everything. Look at all of the... So there's been an increase in recent in inventory, as you can see in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarters. It's been sitting above the threshold, above the trend line, yeah? So you can say to yourself, now, remember, this doesn't mean anything. It means only when you compare it to other suburbs and look at other suburbs' inventory, as well as short-term inventory. But in this instance, overall trend is reducing. In a hierarchy of weighting, overall trend has a higher significance. Sorry, long-term trend has a higher significance than a short-term trend because of its forcefulness and direction. And when you're analyzing suburbs, a year ago, if you imagine, let's say in 2022, sorry, 2 years ago, at this point here, you will already would have seen a trend that's taken a substantial nosedive. So you would have known that this area was having less and less stock on market. You could have already made that decision 2 years ago by looking at the trend. The same for inventory. Inventory was actually even better 2 years ago. It was actually sitting below the trend line and much further. Now, building approvals. What do we look at? Again, we look at current building approvals. There's 22 approvals. It's neutral. Now, what are building approvals? It's future supply. So it protects us from, you know, a warm spot not becoming a hot spot, or vice versa. Or influences, not protects us, influences. What do we see here? We see a spike in recent building approvals. Now, again, that's a cross. So when you're weighing metrics, you have to first determine the significance of the recent spike, and then you have to put a cross against it. It's increasing, which means that there's higher potential. Now, see this spike? It hasn't changed the trend. The overall trend is more forceful, it's going down, so it's more significant and important. But there is a recent spike. Consider it. And this is for all the naysayers about Melbourne. When they're talking about oversupply, I would like to in certain areas, I would like them to show me the graph where it shows an oversupply. Now, in building approvals, we see an overall trend that it's taken a nosedive, good, tick, recent trend increasing, cross. See how I'm looking at everything. And now when I'm saying analysis takes a long time, is that you need to centralize this into a document where you can actually see it and you can assign values to it. And it becomes a mathematical equation. Let's go down to hold periods. And this is your question, Arshad. We see a hold periods trend that it's increasing dramatically, but we see a bit of change in sentiment. Yeah, we see people selling off, then a little bit buying, then selling off, then keeping the property for a long time, a substantial increase, then a bit of a nosedive hitting the trend, then, you know. Now, there are 3 ways to analyze this metric. The current value, 7.28 years, which is about 1 property cycle, and it's decent. And by the way, I say it's decent for this price point. I know it's meaningful for this price point because I've seen other graphs at this price point. Again, as I said, it's never inherently good or bad in itself. It's always good or bad in comparison. So current value is 7.28. Slope of the upward trend going up. And then you can also assign a value, if you want, or some kind of significance to the sporadic nature of the change in sentiment. Think about how you're going to assess it, how you're going to assign a value. Whether you're going to look at angles in change, whether you're going to look at, you know, how many years it has spent below trend or above trend. There are different ways to skin the cat, but there's one graphs. I've just given you 3 different points of information that you can analyze it upon. Again, remember, triangulation, looking at one piece of information from many different angles. You know, I've just created 3 different angles for one graph. So going further down, going on the demand side now we've addressed the supply side. Demand side, see a lot of people, and why I like this area in particular, Arshad, is Current days on market is sitting at 51 days. So if somebody looked at this area and said, oh, it's 51 days, that's too much, you know, I'm not sure about this area. I love these areas. I love these areas where current values are high, but the overall trend is taking a substantial nosedive. Because I know I will enter the market before everyone else realizes, and it becomes too hot, and you start seeing days on market at 25 or 20.
So Matt, just looking at days on market on that one, the overall trend line is trending down. But if you look at, let's say, the last 8 months from December 2023, it seems to be like roughly the same, maybe it's slightly trending up or like staying flattish, right around that 50.
That's right. It's hitting, if you average it out, it's hitting the trend essentially.
Yeah.
Give or take.
So
Give or
how do
take.
we interpret the fact that it's like the overall trend line across what is this 4 years is down, but the last 8 months is stagnant and not peaking down further?
Yeah. So as I said before, in significance, is in a matter of significance, this long-term trend is much more forceful and more significant.
Yeah.
So you first assign significance to the long-term trend, and then you assign it to the short-term trend. Now, in this instance, there's more long-term trend has a more favorable outcome or an outlook, but it's more forceful and it's more significant than short-term trend. I wouldn't, this short-term trend I like it. It's mainly hitting the trend line, which is reducing. But if you wish, now remember when I said there's a level of discretion that's always going to be applied at the end of the decision, remember? So you're going to apply a level of discretion here and say, I don't like it. But mate, when you see other areas in comparison, you're going to realize that it's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, the overall trend is taking a nosedive while it's sitting at 51 days. All the while, we have a substantial reduction in supply.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, let's look at the last year growth. It's hitting 12%. It's booming. It's a hotspot, but there's still opportunity here. You can look at the discounting, guys. So this is interesting. It's interesting. It's one of these hotspot, warm spot areas. And now somebody's going to say, but it's went across the 10 threshold. Again, nothing. I'm giving you thresholds for guidance, but it doesn't mean that they're fixed and they're always like that. I'm telling you, work around it. Kind of. This is a bit of a threshold. Understand it. So this one's had 12% growth in the last year, yet there's still opportunity to discount property in this area because days on market is higher. All the while, you have a reducing and nosediving supply. This is a great entry opportunity. Now, the fact that it's grown 12% in the last year means that we've missed something, but I can guarantee you that this is going to pump even more, and as days on market lowers, and it will lower because of the trend. And it will lower because the overall trend, the long-term one is actually going down and down. By the way, it's not only about the days on market trend. It's a days on market in response to the reducing stock. So as the days on market trend is reducing overall, there's less and less stock on the market. So even a smaller reduction in the days on market produces more forceful growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what else do we see in this area? We see an overall trend in vacancy rate dropping. Now, a recent trend is increasing, which is, now again, we got to superimpose it against other areas, but it's nothing too dramatic. Buy and search index, I don't really consider this metric much. So search for rentals is increasing, which means that this trend here for rentals will potentially go down, which will inadvertently lead to probably increased rents. Buy index is actually dropping. Now the question is, will buy index, by the way, again, significances. Buy and search index has 3 degrees of separation or 10 degrees of separation between me searching for a property and me actually purchasing. So how significant is this metric? Well, a lot less significant than days on market. So overall, I really like what I see, especially that there's discounting happening in this area, which means that I can generate equity by entering the market and actually negotiating the property down. Now, I have to see its long-term potential. Now, remember, we've analyzed 1 to 4 years. I would have to see its long-term potential. And in this instance, I analyzed the GRC. I analyzed its arshad, the renter to owner ratio. I analyze volatility index, projection projected returns, many other factors, you know, and I go to the top as well. Look at industry centralization, flooding, bushfire effects. I'll lay out as many metrics as I can, long-term metrics, to realize to come to a particular conclusion. I looking at everything just as a snapshot. High infrastructure investing, industry, you know, is 70 out of 100. Diversification, it's not too bad. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. It's not something, again, in comparison to others, you wait and you see, but sitting at a 70, it's decent. The GRC has gone into the negative growth zone only once, which is interesting, and it has been hitting the, you know, the zero threshold, because it sort of signals market fundamentals. And I really like this. You usually see even better areas going into negative zone many more times and dipping into the negative growth zone more. The arshad is one. It means it's socioeconomically disadvantageous. However, you're talking about a price point of 450.
Yes.
So you're not going to get an arshad of 10 for a price point of 450. Horses for courses. You know what I mean? So again, in comparison to others, it's good. Others will be 1, you know. What I'm concerned about is renter to owner ratio, because it's 37. Now, my threshold is usually 35. So it's a bit over the threshold. It's not too much. Why am I concerned about it? Because when macroeconomic conditions change, investors can't hold on to the property because interest rates are rising, which is mortgage repayments are rising at a faster pace than rents. They'll start disposing, which will bring new stock to the market. And if there's no demand to absorb it, you'll see price decline. See the narrative? Boom, 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 3 metrics. So I like this area, but let's see other areas. Curvin, for example.
We actually have a few questions. So Ram said, looks like the graph of inventory is following quite a similar pattern. Oh, that's a statement. Archana said, does more building approvals equate to more inventory in the future? So in this case, the inventory graph could go upward. Am I reading it right?
Correct. So what we've seen a spike. We've seen a spike in building approvals, as I say, recently. The overall trend is reducing, but there's a recent spike, which can lead in 2 years' time to new stock coming onto market and being presenting itself as a stock on market for sale, not inventory, stock on market. Now, again, stock on market and inventory are related, but yes, it's a correct observation. And again, that's exactly what you need to do and how you need to think. How will one metric affect the other? I urge people to understand that there's no perfect alignment of metrics. That a compromise needs to be made. What we are doing is increasing the probability. So we are addressing everything, and that's a phenomenal question. Will these building approvals increase? Will there be more and more in the future? Will it shift the trend? And then subsequently in the next 2 years lead to additional supply? Now, be very careful about using the term oversupply lightly. Additional supply doesn't mean oversupply. Oversupply only means when there's so much supply that there's not enough demand to absorb it. To confirm that there's an oversupply in a market, you must consider both supply and demand side of the equation. But it is a great observation. I agree with you, you know. Now, how much significance are you going to place on the recent spike? See, you have to in your mind have intellectual honesty. When I say you, everyone, me. If you're going to place a lot of significance on recent pipe, not knowing a recent pump in building approvals, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, you must ask yourself then, well, what significance am I going to assign to the long-term trend then? You have to ask yourself, if the recent events matter, then how much does a particular behavior for large periods of time matter? And you have to make that decision. Now, I'm telling you that long-term trend is more important than recent trend, which is why recent trend is more important than current month's metric. Now, it's very common sense if you think about it, because metric for the current month only shows me that month. Metric for recent trends shows me more months, but metric for long-term trends shows me more months. Now, it's very common sense to understand the gradation and which one is more significant in analysis. The more information you have about a particular metric, the further back in time you go, the more reliable decisions you can make upon it. if you have only a small data set, which is why the term sample exists. So in order for us to make a decision about a particular sample, we need more data in that sample. So it's common sense, but if it's not sinking for some people, understand that long-term trends carry higher weighting and importance in your analysis than short-term. And short-term trends carry higher weighting and importance in analysis than current values for this month. So I like that observation. It's correct. You think about it in those terms, but just be careful to make a leap in analysis and discount an area, understanding that first, a perfect area doesn't exist. And second, that you also have to assign significance to other part of that metric to see what you think about it.
Beautiful. Another question over here. What's the affordability for this suburb? I don't think you...
Yeah, that's bro, well done. That's the most important thing. It's sitting below 30 years. Now, 28.8. In all honesty, it's actually close to hitting the 30s threshold.
Yeah.
For 450K. I'm surprised, but it's still affordable for its residents.
Yeah.
Okay. So what usually happens is when it becomes unaffordable, usually the internal, let me use the owner-occupier demand starts dropping off. And this is when you see when one cohort of demand starts to drop off, that's inadvertently manifested as more days on market.
Beautiful. Next question, is the trend line a rolling average of 12 months? I believe it's a rolling average of the 4 years, or is it 12? These trend.
No, this trend line. No, the stock, this value here is a rolling average of 3 months.
No, so what is the trend line? He's asking if it's a rolling average of 12 months or longer.
Yeah, yes. No, it's the last 4 years.
Okay, rolling average of 4 years. Okay, cool.
No, it's not a rolling average. Well, yeah, it is a rolling average. That's right. It's essentially, you see the histogram behind every, we release every month the actual stock on market, and then we just interpolate a trend line from the releases all the way spanning back 4 years.
Beautiful. And then someone has asked, how do you check out after land size in the suburb we selected? Is that possible?
Land size, how much land we have here.
No, I don't think it's like total land size available, but more like kind of like how you have the demand curve for bedroom sizes. I think that's what he's asking. I'm not too sure. If you want to rephrase your question,
I think the question is how much available land there is for development, because that's the usual question that we get. And let him confirm.
Yeah, sweet. I actually have one question for you. And this question might annoy you, but I know it's a question that a lot of people would ask about this suburb in particular.
This seems like a one-on-one with you and he. I think you're asking questions that you've jotted down for yourself before. What do you think?
Look,
it seems like a one-on-one. If you want to book me one-on-one, we can schedule that. It's fine.
No, I'm using these webinars as free mentoring.
Yeah, I like that. I like that scenario. It's good. Anyway, go.
With this suburb over here, like, so let's just say hypothetically, I present this suburb to a client and show them all the data, construct the narrative, and then they say something like, okay, it all makes sense, looks good to me, but I don't know how I feel about investing in a suburb where, or like over here, this is not just an individual suburb, a town with a population of 10,000, right? How would you respond to that?
Well, Arshad, how would you respond to that?
Honestly, I don't know, right? Because
why not, bro? Why not? Because let me just say this. If the population matters, why has it grown 13% in the last year? Like it's so common sense that I can't even, like, to me it's a non-question. Now what you've done there is you've assigned significance to population and you have overridden every other metric on the platform to come to a conclusion. So that's a more extensive answer. Now, it all depends on the detail levels of comparison that you provided and the explanation. But we've just gone through a half an hour explanation of trends to come down to a question where an individual will place value on the fact that it's got 10,000 people and assigned all of the significance about their choice to this little metric. And then
I think that's the answer to my question. So
and then the common sense one would be, Mr. Client, why are you investing in property? And then they will say to you, well, I want freedom.
Yeah.
How do you get there? Well, I buy assets that grow in value. Okay, so we want to buy assets that grow in value. Tell me, Mr. Client, why is this area pumping if population is a concern?
There you go. There you go.
The thing is, and by the way, why has this area grown 77% in the last decade?
Yeah.
79 in the last 7 years. 72, look at that. It's been pumping. It's been pumping recently.
Yeah.
Now, if Mr. Client wants an area that's going to generate for him 20% compounded returns for infinity, well, he should reassess his sanity, or her. Because it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, this area will drop off and come back, and will drop off and will come back. But the crucial explanation is this. If the population matters, why has it grown this much? And then the second thing is, if population matters, tell me why everything else doesn't matter.
No, I think that's the answer, right? It's getting the client to understand the significance of different factors, right? And this is actually a problem I faced initially, and kind of, I think that's the way that I went about it on a different scale, right? When I first started looking at Townsville, I think I went there, I'm not going to say extremely early, but relatively early, right? A lot of the clients that I was working with, especially return ones, they were like, we purchased our first one in Perth or Adelaide. There's a population of 1 million, 2 million there. How can I go to a place with 150K, right? Now it's like, okay, it's that same narrative, but at a different number, right? Over there, it was compared.
So I don't want to be, with all due respect,
yeah,
we have to understand, not to you, but to people at large who place certain significances or something,
yeah,
it highlights their misunderstanding about what produces growth.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a small town, if the supply is reducing and demand is increasing, you will see growth. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, the mastermind community is about teaching you the ability to actually explain yourself. And I've done this in a couple of questions and explanations, but there are more thorough explanations. And I just want to show you, this is a good digression. Like, this is the ranking that I was doing. Look at this sheet here. So you have all of the metrics, and you have associated weightings from 1 to 24. We are comparing 35 metrics. So we're comparing suburbs, on 36 metrics. I don't want to go into the reason why it's 24. It takes a long time. But I'm assigning significance to each metric. A weighting that is higher than another metric in response to a particular brief. And not only that, you're providing a thorough reasoning as to why in the rationale column. So this is what the mastermind teaches. The mastermind teaches you to understand which metrics are very important for you to realize your goals, and you have to be able to explain it to yourself and to others. And when you go through this process, and then you go through the ranking, by the way, and this is a sheet. Look at the right. I'm going to go slow. Look at what a real comparison actually means. Do you understand? Like, and see, your question or someone's question was about population. I took 10 hours to compare 8 areas here, or 9, on the basis of a particular brief by ranking them and assigning weightings to metrics, which will increase the probability of realizing particular results. This is why I've never seen a HTAG client not deliver for their clients. Never. Now, this sounds arrogant. It's not arrogant, guys. I've put in hours and hours and hours of work and sense making and written my rationales that I sit down and I tell you and I explain to you this is why. Now, if you ask me about the population, I've given you a few answers, 2, which are sort of rudimentary, I would say. But there is an answer, that can be much bigger. And this is what you need to learn. And then by having that ability, and the reason why I've asked you, Arshad, is if you just look at the last year growth and you consider that question, something doesn't add up. It doesn't add up to me, because what inadvertently that question stipulates is that there's a risk to invest in that location. Now, my next question to the client is, risk to what? For growth, for me realizing my goals. Okay, Why has it pumped in X amount of in the last 7 years? You just bring it back down to the goal. What are you trying to achieve, Mr. Client? And this is the issue that people have with picking certain areas over others, having biases. You go through this, mate, you get humbled. There's no bias. You get so humbled that how many areas do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I have baby heights twice because I was analyzing 4 and 3 bedroom differences. 7, 8, 9. I have 9 areas here. I have 9 areas. And not only was I looking at the weighting of metrics, and let me explain what weighting means. Now, if I'm comparing on a suburb page 2 areas, do you think that it's price? Price is a metric, 450K. Do you think that it's price? Let's say you already set a budget. You set a budget 500K and you have a metric price. Where is it? Here. Where is it? Price. Yeah. So do you think that that metric carries a higher weighting than the long-term trend in supply for you realizing your goals? I'll help you. The answer is no. Price doesn't matter. You already set the range. You already set the range. You already know what you're buying under. The price itself doesn't lead to growth. The price doesn't contribute. This is what leads to growth, the supply and demand metrics. So when you have all of these metrics on the platform, you have to understand which one carries higher significance than the other in relation to what you're trying to achieve, the goal that you're trying to achieve. Now, this is teachable. This is teachable information. Okay. And it's teachable because I force people through the community to actually rationalize every weighting and every metric. For example, a person, and I don't know how much you participate, I think you do in the mastermind, but a person comes to me and says, I want to buy under SMSF and my budget is 600K. Do you think that yield will carry higher significance there?
To me, not really, right? You're looking for long-term growth. They probably
No. SMSF needs to be self-sustainable. So you need to have certain returns. So you need to have higher yields.
Yeah. Okay.
So do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because you're buying under SMSF, it needs to have a certain return for you to not, it needs to be self-sustainable asset. Yeah. So yield and rent growth will carry high significance in that instance because it relates to that specific brief. So you need to understand the intricacies of the brief and how each metric matters more than the other in order to produce a weighting and then a ranking and then a final result. And when you present this to the client, and some of our members have gone through all the way, not some, most. We have newcomers coming in every day, you know what I mean? So I teach to do it. Most of them gone through all the way. They can tell you how they speak to clients and how they convert them and how long it takes them to close a client, etc., etc. Because you can explain things right away and the reasoning behind it.
Beautiful.
Anyway, going back.
Yeah.
We're conscious of time. We've got another half an hour. Let's look at curving quickly.
Yeah. Should we jump into some of the suburbs from mid-market? Actually, there's a few questions. We'll jump into the questions after a bit. Maybe we'll jump into some of the mid-market purchase point ones.
The mid-market. Which one do you want to? You got mid-market above 500. That's right. So you got Birddale, Bushland. So you got Cairns and Townsville mainly.
And
you got
from Cairns because I know some people are starting to look there as an option, buying there. Let's pick.
I know which one I like specifically, but yeah, pick which one you want.
Let's go Mount Sheridan.
That's one of my favorites.
There you go. I'm reading your mind, brother.
Mount Sheridan is one of my favorite. Let me see if I was doing some comparison here before. Let me. Now, when I say it's one of my favorites again for that price point, for that brief, for a particular brief, etc., etc. It is seeing 7% growth in the last year, sitting at 589. Let's see room disparity. It's interesting that there's about 80K room disparity between 3 and 4 better. So that's 80. No. There's more than that. It's 130. No, sorry. So 80 plus 50. Yeah. So yeah, that's 130. which is interesting if you want to add a bedroom and generate substantial equity for those who are listening who like value add options. I'll come to the long-term metrics after. I'll affordability. See what's interesting is that, remember the one that we're looking at before was 440K typical price, arshad, Calgary, whatever what was the previous one that we're looking at?
That one, yeah.
Yeah, so that one was, look at it, it was
600K.
28. Sorry, where's Mount Sheridan? Sorry, is it this one? Yeah. So see, Mount Sheridan has a typical value that's much higher, nearly 200K higher than the one we're looking at before. Well, not 200, 150, and yet it has the same affordability index. So you can see how great this area in respect to relationship between price affordability. That one is, and by the way, look at the arshad. Arshad is a 5 instead of that other one being a 2.
Yeah.
So this one has better socioeconomics. It's the same level, has the same level of affordability as the area before that we looked at, which was 450K, and this one is 600 or 600, 600 nearly, and has a much higher, much better socioeconomics. Now let's look at the supply and demand dynamics. We see stock on market reducing both recent and overall. Same with inventory. Building approvals are trending up, but look at them how sporadic they are. Now, how many building approvals now? 9, nothing. They're actually trending up, but you also need to look at the histogram at the back. So we see that not every month there's a building approval, and there are half a year to a year sometimes where there's no building approvals, which means that this metric here doesn't have enough volume for us to assign too much significance to it. But even in any case, it's currently sitting at a favorable 9 approvals. Look at the whole period, sitting at 8.5. Now we do see a change in sentiment, but it's much higher than the previous one. So supply is reducing. That's all I want to know. Look at the demand side and see, this is what's interesting. Okay. This one has a days on market of 25 and has seen only 7% growth, 7.5 in the last year. The other area, which one was it? This was the one. The other area has seen 12.6% growth, and it has a days on market of 50 something. So what does this tell you? So it tells you there's a price lag in Mount Sheridan. To me, there's a growth lag here because supply is reducing in the same way, forcefully, we can see. Days on market is also dropping overall, as well as recent one is dropping, and it's sitting at 25 days, man. And yet it hasn't traversed the 10% growth territory. I like Mount Sheridan for so many reasons. Vacancy rate is taking a nosedive, both recent and overall. You know, we see.
Might be a bit difficult to buy Mount Sheridan after today's webinar, but
no, it's a great area. It's and one that I've been, and by the way, give me a sec.
You might want to stop sharing this share.
Doesn't matter. I want to show you an email where I gone and what I suggested to a client to buy there. It was last November. It was last November. They've engaged me to do a report. Look at the discounting, guys. So we see the scatter plot happening here and then nothing in the last couple of months because days on market has been going lower. So there's no discounting. Now it's not anymore a buyer's market, but it's still not hitting that 10% growth mark. You know, I really like this area for so many reasons. It's got good socioeconomics. Has a very low renter to owner ratio. Remember that other one had 37. This one has 26. Now that other one had a better GRC in a sense that it was less in the negative growth zone before. Now you can't get perfection, but this one has more pronounced cycles, which to me is you know, it allows me to predict more what's going to happen. What else do we see about this area? Industry centralization, so 70, same as before. No bushfire effect, no flood risk. By the way, population smaller than the previous one. However, it's part of Cairns. The other one is more of a standalone thing, you know. But overall, like I really, really like this suburb for so many reasons. And it presents great opportunity for those. Now, again, we're talking about a suburb. I can guarantee you, because I've done that, and in this spreadsheet here, Mount Sheridan was one that I was comparing, as you can see. Here it is. I can't actually, it's locked now, but there it is. So I've done comparisons against other opportunities, and I'm telling you that Mount Sheridan is up there for particular briefs, you know. And it's not too hot in a sense that, well, days of market is 25, so it's going to be hard to, it's tough. But our members have been buying there in Bayview Heights and Brinsmead recently. And there's information that's been fed from the ground that's telling me that more and more investors are actually merge into the market. And why? You also have to look at, you know, the ripple effect. You know, Townsville is booming so much that even though you can afford, let's say, Townsville because it's a lower price point than Cairns, it's becoming very hard for an individual investor to find real estate there, unless you're a buyer's agency that buys high volumes and has, you know, deals with, you know, sales agents or whatever. I'm not saying deals in a negative way. Sorry, I want to correct that. But it actually has good connections with sales agents. You as an investor, you will struggle to find real estate there. So you have to, as an investor, to gravitate somewhere else. Now,
Or you
Cairns,
could use a buyer's agent, but that's a
no. Sorry, I said investor. I mean, I meant both cohorts.
yeah.
You know, buyers agents, exactly. Buyers agents are in constant contact with sales agents. They've created relationships. They created networks. So, you know, and they do the, you know, on the ground work. This is when people say, you know, I remember when I started the business, a lot of people were coming to me and saying, oh, Matt, you know, are you going to replace the buyer's agents? How am I going to replace the buyer's agent? There's so much work that a buyer's agent does that a platform or an AI, you know how the usual spill is, the AI, the new AI that's coming, that you just can't do. You know what I mean? One of things being finding the right asset in a hot market.
There you go.
So that's Mount Sheridan. Now the top price point. Let's move to top price. You want to do that? Because we've
Yes,
got
let's do. I'm conscious of time. I know we want to end a bit early today. Let's do
a
one.
bit earlier after 2 hours. Are you serious? That's ending late.
We'll tie it off. We'll tie it off soon. Let's do one final sum up here. Pick up the
Yeah.
last couple of questions and then tie it off. And we have Victoria. If you haven't already registered for our Victoria event, make sure to register for that one. That's actually out of all of the webinars, that's the one that I'm most excited for. You know, I'm a Melbourneite. I love Victoria. Everyone's bashing on the Victoria property market, but sentiment's changing. Markets are starting to.
Yeah, see, it's changing. It's
Yeah,
changing.
exactly.
And a year ago, if you said Melbourne, you would have been given a straitjacket, you know?
Exactly. So
But
I'm
yeah,
very keen for that event. I've dropped the links in the chat. Make sure to register. Also, just again, plugging again, don't forget to, if you haven't already, sign up for HTAG. Prices go up tomorrow. Discount code is just shared in the chat. Let's look at one more suburb, but then look at a few questions and
yeah,
top
sure.
off. Hopefully, everybody's finding all of this stuff very useful. I know I definitely am. I think someone over here said, when people want coaching, they call the coach. When legends want coaching, they bring the coach to a webinar. So looks like I'm a legend. So, yeah.
It's a good. No, Arshad and I go way back. I'm just teasing him, yeah. But yeah, I like that one. I like that saying. I'm gonna remember that one.
Beautiful. Let's pick one of these. I'll let the crowd do the picking this time because I've been selfishly choosing all the
Yeah.
suburbs that I want to know more about. Somebody in the crowd want to choose one of these suburbs that they want analyzed. These are obviously all higher price point suburbs. I think 750K plus. Springfield. Okay, Michelle has asked for Springfield. Let's do Springfield.
Let's do Springfield. Luckily, there's a copy and paste because my spelling is like atrocious. So Queensland, Springfield, boom. Now this is a higher price point, different dynamics. Boy, it's been pumping in the last year, which is interesting. Let's look at the room disparity. Woof! Look at that.
Juicy.
Look at that. 674 for a 3-bedder and 859 for a 4-bedder.
Mm.
So there's a lot of opportunity there for value add, guys, heaps. And, you know, imagine the compounding effect from adding value and then also getting the market momentum of warm spot or hotspot, if you want to call it, you know. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. This is where how you come actually much faster towards your goals. Again, a low population area, Arshad, I think we should be worried.
I feel like now you're just taking this out. I said
I think we should be concerned.
I wasn't the one asking the question. I said if a hypothetical client.
No, that's it, man. Listen, I am thinking it's you. No, that's it. No, I'm
I feel
kidding.
like you're gonna hold that to over me for the rest of my life, bro.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm a peaceful guy, man. I'm probably gonna move to a tiny little town with 2,000 people. Have a little,
I'm the same. Yeah. Just
little.
escape. No. Essentially, the question is pertinent, but it's a complex answer. You know, think about why you're placing primacy of one thing over another, and we'll go from there. But what I don't like about this area, for example, again, it's part of our shortlist, and nothing is perfect. It meets my criteria of above 50 industry centralization, but it has 60. Remember, all the other ones had 70. So it's closer to the 50 or the average mark. And when I'm ranking the suburbs, for example, let's go back to, let's say, compare it at one of these places here. There is a risk score, see? So I rank them, I list the risk score and I rank them on those bases. And then I assign a significance to that, you know what I mean? But this is a bit of a concern. When I say a bit of a concern, again, I'm analyzing metrics against, I'm analyzing areas against one another. So I'm placing this on notice, essentially. I need to refer back to it. Overall, we see high infrastructure spending. Let me just look at the area and how it looks. Yeah, so that's Ipswich. Yeah. High infrastructure spending, which is always good. It's a proxy to population growth. If I look at the growth patterns, it has grown 100% in a decade. It has done so for a reason. I don't look at that as a negative. I look at that as a positive. So fundamentals are, you know, must be okay. Even what we even see, we see, it's interesting. So we see the pump at around the 5 to 7 year mark. No, in the 5 year mark. So it has grown the most in the 5 years. And then recently, well, it's sort of evenly distributed around. So this area has been growing, but mainly when you see the recent pump. So when I say recently, in the last 5 years, this is why it's like 85% in the last 5 years. Which now, if you want to analyze it from a counter-cyclical perspective, then the question is, okay, if it has grown X amount the last 5 years, how much room does it have to go? And that's a warranting question and a very important one. And just to show you an example that I do consider it. See, I put here the difference between 3 and 10 year growth, and I assign a significance and I explain because I want counter-cyclical investing. So it does matter. When I'm saying there's a lot of things here that we can use, but it matters how much significance we assign to it. Now, moving down, GRC, see, this is, you know, it's seen a bit of a flat, you know, flat growth in the past. And this is a COVID pump. Okay. A lot of areas have pumped through COVID. Now, my question that I'm asking when I'm inspecting this graph is, you know, has it pumped because of the right fundamentals, or has it pumped because just, you know, government was handing out candy in the form of money? So that's one of the questions that I also come back to when I assess comparing areas, you know. Has an side of 6, rent to owner ratio 33, which is okay. This side of 6 is okay, so it's above average. Considering its high price point, it would need to be there in order for it to grow further. So I'm happy. I would prefer to see it at a 7 for this price range. I prefer to see it at a 7 because we want it to go to 1 million, yeah. So I prefer to see it at a 7, but 6 is okay. Again, remember we had a couple of areas. We just picked one, so we got to compare it against, you know, others. Excuse me, I'm just shifting from one. Yeah, this is the thing. Okay, so let's look at supply and demand. We see stock or market sitting at a neutral, currently 11 listings, but overall trend is reducing. Recent trend is increasing a little, but only minorly. But we see a steep reduction in the overall trend. Like, look at this trend here, and then we just went boom. Now, the slope of the trend happened because of the huge disparity between this and that. I get it. But still, you know, that wasn't an outlier. It still continued to trend downward. So I'm happy with the overall stock on market trend. Same with inventory. Building approvals are reducing trend overall as well as recent. Let's look at the whole periods. Look at the straight line of the whole periods, guys, here. Remember how I said, you know, sentiment change. And you compare it to other areas that had much more change in sentiment. This one is very similar to, if I had to compare it to Taylor Hills in Melbourne, Arshad. We don't see any change in sentiment. It's sitting at 10 years, actually right at the trend line, and it's been increasing substantially for a long period of time. What does it tell me? People just want to live there. And they sell off property every 10 years, which means that the introduction of new supply from existing stock is every 10 years, which is nearly above your whole period time frame anyway, because usually people hold between 7 to 10 years. So I like this. I like its supply side. Look at its demand. Currently, again, see, look at this. It's sitting at 31 days on market currently, which is opportunistic. However, look at its bar. So that's why it's a rolling average between 3. But the last bar is 50. Yeah. But this 50 is not going to change the overall trend. The overall trend is reducing. We saw a few increases before, well above the trend, sort of protruding above, and not affecting the trend because the subsequent I guess, days on market releases were lower. So they were pulling the trend down even further, you know? So now it comes back to analysis of the slope. This slope is fairly decent. I mean, if you imagine a flat line here, you know, this angle is pretty good. And it's pretty good. When I say good, it's a subjective term, but it's good. You'll see when you compare, you know, other price points. So I like what I see. Rolling average is sitting at 31 for the last 3 months, which is great as well. Most of it was below trend here, which means the supply is reducing, demand is increasing. Hence why we see the 12% growth in, you know, when you look at trends a long time, you come to a position where you can actually make predictions about how much growth it has seen in the last year. I think I said this before on the last one. When I look at these trend lines, I can actually infer and know how much, you know, approximately seeing growth in the last year, simply from the, you know, get forceful movements of the slope and the angles of the slope, you know. Anyway, vacancy rate, that's a bit of a concern. Overall, it's increasing. We see a drop and then an increase. Now, again, consider this in terms of your brief. So we have an increasing vacancy rate trend overall, slightly, not dramatically, but slightly. It is increasing, as well as recently it has been increasing. Now, because of this price point, which is at 800K or whatever it is, I forgot, your holding costs are going to be higher. So you might have a client who wants to enter a market that's 800K, but places higher value on their ability to reduce their negative gearing. In that instance, your trend for vacancy rates needs to be nosediving, because you know that when a nosediving trend in vacancy rates actually leads to an increase in rents. So this is how you analyze certain, and you assign weightings to this in an appropriate way, specifically on the basis of the brief. But I don't like this. It's not perfect, but you know, what can we do? It's a fairly new area from what I can see, because buy and search index doesn't exist before, or it's an anomaly. I have to check this out, why that is so, because we have inventory before, but maybe buy and search index wasn't tracked before 2018. But overall, it's not a bad area. Why? Because we see a reducing supply and an increasing demand. The concerns that I have is about industry centralization, which is this score here. And another concern I have is the fact that the vacancy rate slope is increasing a little, which means that rents will be suffering. But if rents are suffering, prices are growing. It's an inverse relationship usually. So, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. But, you know, it fits the box of reducing supply, increasing demand kind of thing, which is the primary factor for analyzing price, or for predicting price growth.
Beautiful. All right. I think we'll now tackle a few final questions, and then we'll tie it off for the night. Recording is available, so you can have a look at all those other suburbs as well that were listed under the different purchase price ranges. And then again, just learning how to use HTAG for yourself and identifying areas that fit the briefs that you look for. Just because we identified certain suburbs doesn't mean that those are the only suburbs that need to be invested in. It depends on the brief and what you're looking for in the brief, and again how you're gonna weight different metrics, how you're gonna weight them in your decision making process. So yeah, let's tackle a few final questions. So someone over here said, some people say that if a suburb has 40% plus growth in the last 3 years, it has already peaked. How would you answer that?
Yeah, I know some people say that. So again, the way I would answer it is I would say I would consider that as an aspect, but I would not place a high weighting on that in comparison to supply and demand dynamics. So let me give you an example. Mount Sheridan has grown 30% in the last 3 years, which means that it's been growing above average in the last 3 years, but it still has a continued reducing supply and increasing demand. So the fact that it has pumped 30% in the last 3 years or 10% yearly, to me, does not matter. When I say does not matter, to me, what matters more is the fact that its supply is reducing and demand is increasing. Then the next aspect that we consider in that question is the aspect of time. How much longer then do I have in this area if it has pumped 40% in the last 5 years or 3 years? And that is a question, that can be answered from a multitude of other factors. But my first answer is you cannot infer that an area will not grow simply because it has grown in the past, because growth happens on account of reducing supply and increasing demand. You first have to address the supply and demand equation and then look at the past growth. And when you have two areas, let's say you have two areas, and this is why I said initially comparison is important. Let's say you have two areas, both have the same supply and demand dynamics, i.e. are reducing supply and increasing demand, but one has seen a lot more growth recently. I would pick the other one, of course. I would consider it, but I would consider it only in relation to a comparison with other suburbs that potentially have a more favorable demand, have a more favorable recent growth domain, all other things being equal.
Beautiful. That makes sense. Someone else has asked, is there a specific brief template that you use for your clients that you are happy to share? Is that a resource that's available?
Yeah, and it's a resource that we covered at the onset. It's what's your price point, what's your investment time horizon, you want a hotspot or a warm spot, and what's your risk profile. That's essentially, those are the 4 points that I need. And then I segregate, I sort of divide those points a little bit further, but not much further. And out of that, I have the ability. Am I still sharing?
Yeah.
Out of that, I have the ability to produce this beast. But I just need those 4 points. That's essentially what I use.
Beautiful. Cool. Rom has asked, if you don't have a specific preference in the area, but only criteria is to have minimal negative gearing and good short-term growth, how can you look up top 5 to 10 suburbs to deliver this? So I think, Rom, for you, I'd recommend watching the WA webinar. So in this week, we mainly looked at suburbs. In the previous webinar, we looked at filtering processes to get to suburbs.
So see, this is the filtering process, guys, on our homepage. So you need to go through a certain filtering process. You need to set conditions that relate to your brief in order to produce a shortlist. And we've covered this in the WA.
I definitely recommend watching the recording there. It'll explain very clearly how to go through that filtering process. And then obviously, once you join the community mastermind, there's a lot of resources in there that takes you through.
There's a lot of videos, 10-15 minutes instructional videos, how to help you and how to guide you through the whole process. Yeah, on how to think essentially.
Cool.
In regards to data, in regards to that.
Peter asks, is there a copy of that score and weighting scaffold in the mastermind?
There is. I've shared it multiple times. Peter, just message me in the mastermind and I'll give it to you.
Beautiful.
But Peter, one thing that I have to say, it changes on the base of the brief, yeah? So everyone in the mastermind goes through the process, and the process is the filtering, the shortlisting, the ranking, and then the comparison. And whoever wants to go through the process, I actually mentor at every step, and I teach them how to assign and explain. And you would have seen, if you're in the mastermind, you would have seen a lot of people pasting these same spreadsheets that you see. They pasted, watch, where is it? There's one that was pasted the other day. Here it is. No, data dictionary analysis. People post spreadsheets here, and I go through them. Here it is. Detailed comparison. Suburb detailed comparison. They paste it. And then I go through and they do the weightings, they do the rationales, they do the suburb ranking, they go through the whole process. They paste the short list, they paste the filtering criteria, and they need to provide me with that information for me to do a thorough feedback. And then I usually jump on a video and I go through it piece by piece to actually provide that. And we don't charge anything extra for this. This is just part of the mastermind. But the cost to you is your time that you need to invest. I don't do this for people who are not willing to invest the time and actually produce this ranking and watch my videos, instructional videos that I give them to actually get there.
Beautiful. Cool. Mac said such a great thanks, Mac. We're due for a catch up.
Oh, Mac, how you doing?
We have a little spot over here in Essendon, just near the roundabout. Mac, we're due for a session soon. We'll catch it. We'll make a plan.
Mac is a legend. I love Mac.
He's
like such a good person.
Thank you everyone for dialing in. We couldn't do these sessions if there weren't people here to listen. We could. It'd just be again free mentoring for me. So you guys are just enabling me to be taught by Matt, which is great. I love that. Again, everyone, don't forget HTAG prices go up tomorrow. Discount code is here, QLD_data_insights. Don't forget to sign up. Mastermind is awesome. Platform is awesome. Yeah, it's just awesome.
Appreciate it, Arshad. Thank you, man.
Don't forget to sign up for the Victoria session as well. In fact, I did WA at the beginning on purpose, just because that was the one. It was from a marketing. Honestly, the only reason I did WA first was for marketing purposes, because I knew that one was going to get the most traction. But I'm actually the most excited for the Victoria session. It's like a lot of places in Queensland, people are investing just based off, talking to other people. It's like, oh, other BAs are investing in these spots in Mackay. I'm going to invest there. Other people are investing here. I'm going to invest there. Like, again, some people are not even going through a data analysis process. They're just picking areas based off where other people are investing. And they're still getting results, because obviously if there's a bunch of BAs investing there, then it's most likely a good area, right? But Victoria is an area where you can really, really warm spot, especially if you have clients with longer horizons, right? Maybe clients that don't need as much short-term growth. You can get into these markets really early, get discounted properties, get that long-term growth, or just enter into warm spots a lot earlier. So definitely see you guys at the Victoria session.
Victoria has one of my favorite areas.
Yeah. And then after that, we got South Australia and then New South Wales, and we possibly might do one more like for ACT, TAS, and NT, but that's still something that we haven't decided just yet. We'll see by public demand. Cool. We'll give it a couple more minutes if you have any final questions. If not, we'll aim to tie discount code. I'll share it here again. It is actually, can you stop sharing, Matt? I might share my screen with
How do I actually do that? I just realized. What do I press to stop sharing?
It's all good. I'll just screen share and then it should be fine. Give me a second. So
I actually try to stop sharing, but I never use Zoom. Sorry, I'm Zoom challenged.
No, all good, all good. There you go. So discount code is QLD_data_insights. If that isn't working, you can just direct DM me on WhatsApp and I'll make sure to sort it out for you. Yeah, cool.
No worries. Honestly, guys, thanks for joining. It was great. Thanks
Will
for staying all the way to the end.
license or Mastermind is part of the HTAG subscription for the
Yeah, it is.
professional level, right? So professional or elite, you'll get Mastermind.
Yeah, you usually receive an email from me when you subscribe if you want to enter, because it's by choice. And it's by choice simply because you need to invest the time. So I tell you up front what's required. And if you do, then I send you a private link and an access code, and off we go.
Beautiful. Just it's on Telegram, so you can get Telegram on your computer as well. Get WhatsApp on your computer. For all of you who don't already have it, download the computer app. I run half of my business through WhatsApp, and
yeah, I have both on my PC.
Yeah.
So much easier. So much easier.
So much easier.
Yeah.
I see some people, they're just like always on their phone on the side. I'm like, guys, not good for you.
No, I do it all on the PC. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay.
All right.
I think we'll tie it off there. Matt, thank you so much for another great session.
Pleasure, brother. Pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. See you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.